Nathan Brooks stared at his reflection in the marble bathroom mirror of his penthouse suite, adjusting his silk tie for the third time. At 28, he had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. His days were filled with expensive parties, luxury cars, and meaningless relationships with people who only cared about his family fortune. His father, Richard Brooks, had built Brooks Industries from a small machine shop into a manufacturing empire worth billions. But Nathan had never worked a real day in his life. He floated through board meetings, signed papers he barely read, and spent money like water. The company practically ran itself while Nathan played the role of the carefree heir. That morning, everything changed. "Nathan, sit down," his father commanded from behind his massive oak desk. Richard Brooks was a man who demanded respect through presence alone. At 60, he still worked 12-hour days and knew every detail of his business operations. "We need to talk about your future," Richard continued, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment. "Yesterday's board meeting was the final straw. You showed up 2 hours late, clearly hungover, had no idea what project we were discussing." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dad, I was just having a rough morning." "It won't happen again, you're right." "It won't," Richard replied firmly. "Because starting Monday, you're going to work at our Phoenix factory. Not as the owner's son, but as a regular employee. You'll punch a time clock, follow orders, and learn what real work actually means." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. "You can't be serious." "I have meetings, commitments. The charity gala next weekend. The only commitment you have now is proving you're worthy of inheriting this company," Richard said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Inside, you'll find your new identity. Nathan Collins, recent technical school graduate looking for work experience. Only James Peterson, the factory manager, will know who you really are." Nathan opened the folder with trembling hands. Everything was there: a fake resume, a modest apartment rental agreement, even a used Honda Civic registration. His new life looked pathetically ordinary compared to his world of private jets and five-star restaurants. "This is insane, Dad. I can't live like some common worker." Richard's eyes hardened. "Then you can live without the Brooks fortune. Your choice, son. Spend 6 months proving yourself at the factory, or find another career path without my support." The factory floor Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Nathan sat in the parking lot of Brooks Industries' Phoenix division, staring at the industrial building that would be his workplace. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the Honda Civic, still unable to believe his father had actually gone through with this plan. Workers in uniform shirts walked past his car, lunchboxes in hand, talking and laughing together. They looked genuinely happy, despite their modest circumstances. Nathan had never understood how people could find joy in such ordinary lives. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed his new employee handbook and walked toward the main entrance. James Peterson, a kind-faced man in his 50s, met him at the security desk. "Welcome to Brooks Industries," Peterson said with a knowing smile. "I'm James Peterson, the facility manager. I'll be showing you around today." They walked through the factory floor, and Nathan was overwhelmed by the noise, machinery, and organized chaos. Hundreds of workers operated complex equipment, assembled electronic components, and managed quality control processes. The scale and precision impressed him despite his privileged background. "This is where you'll be working," Peterson said, stopping at a workstation near the center of the floor. "Electronics assembly and quality testing. Your supervisor will train you properly." That's when Nathan first saw her. Meeting Violet Martinez approached them with confident strides, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore the same uniform as other workers, but something about her presence commanded attention. Her brown eyes were intelligent and direct, studying Nathan with obvious skepticism. "James, is this our new trainee?" she asked, extending her hand toward Nathan. Her grip was firm and calloused from real work. "Nathan Collins, this is Violet Martinez, our best electronics supervisor," Peterson said. "She'll be training you for the next few weeks." Nathan tried his most charming smile, the one that usually impressed women at cocktail parties. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Martinez. I'm looking forward to learning from someone with your obvious expertise." Violet's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked more skeptical. Right, well, Mr. Collins, let's see what you actually know about electronics. She led him to a workbench covered with circuit boards, resistors, capacitors, and various testing equipment. Nathan stared at the components like they were artifacts from another planet. In his world, electronics meant the latest iPhone or expensive sound systems, not the individual parts that made them work. Let's start simple, Violet said, picking up a basic multimeter. Show me how to test this resistor's value. Nathan held the device like it might explode. He had no idea how multimeters worked, what resistors did, or even how to read the colored bands that indicated their values. His expensive education had covered business theory, not practical engineering. I'm not familiar with this specific model, he said, hoping to sound knowledgeable. Perhaps you could demonstrate the proper technique first. Violet crossed her arms and studied him with growing amusement. Mr. Collins, this is the most basic piece of test equipment in electronics. Are you telling me you've never used a multimeter? Well, I specialize more in the theoretical aspects, Nathan replied weakly. Theoretical aspects, Violet repeated slowly. I see. And what exactly did you study in technical school? Nathan's mind went blank. His fake resume claimed electronics training, but he couldn't even identify basic components. The silence stretched uncomfortably as nearby workers began to notice the interaction. You know what? Violet said finally. Let's try something even simpler. Can you tell me what this component is? She held up a standard resistor with color-coded bands. Nathan squinted at the small cylinder, hoping inspiration would strike. It's clearly an electronic component designed for circuits, he said, trying to sound confident. Several workers nearby started chuckling. Violet shook her head with a mixture of disbelief and pity. Mr. Collins, that's like saying a car is a transportation device with wheels. Technically correct, but completely useless. She placed the resistor back on the bench. I think we need to start with absolute basics. The first day disaster. What followed was the longest workday of Nathan's pampered life. Violet patiently explained fundamental concepts that real technical school graduates would know instinctively. She showed him how to identify components, read schematic diagrams, and use basic tools without damaging expensive equipment. Nathan tried his best, but years of privilege hadn't prepared him for detailed manual work. His hands shook when handling delicate components. He mixed up resistor color codes, connected wires to wrong terminals, and accidentally triggered several safety alarms. During lunch break, he sat alone in the cafeteria, eating a basic sandwich from the vending machine while other workers chatted at nearby tables. The food was nothing like his usual gourmet meals, but his empty stomach made it taste acceptable. Violet approached with her own simple lunch and sat across from him. Rough morning? She asked with surprising gentleness. I'm obviously not what you expected, Nathan admitted, abandoning his usual charm for honest vulnerability. No, you're not, Violet agreed. But everyone starts somewhere. My father always said the difference between a good worker and a great one isn't natural talent. It's willingness to keep trying when things get difficult. Your father sounds wise. He was, Violet said softly. Carlos Martinez worked in factories for 30 years before he passed away. He taught me that honest work has dignity, no matter what society thinks about blue-collar jobs. Nathan felt something shift inside him. In his world, people constantly talked about their achievements, their connections, their wealth. But Violet spoke about her father's wisdom and work ethic with genuine pride. I'd like to honor his memory by becoming someone he'd be proud to train, Nathan said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Violet studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to see past his awkward exterior to something more genuine underneath. All right. Mr. Collins, let's see what you're really made of. Finding unexpected connection the afternoon brought new challenges, but also small victories. Under Violet's patient guidance, Nathan successfully assembled his first simple circuit. When the LED light blinked to life, he felt more genuine satisfaction than he'd experienced from any expensive purchase. Not bad for a complete beginner, Violet said, and her approval meant more to him than praise from business partners or social acquaintances. As the workday ended, Nathan realized he hadn't thought about his usual evening plans once. No expensive restaurants, no exclusive clubs, no meaningless conversations with people, who only cared about his wealth. Instead, he found himself hoping Violet would continue training him tomorrow. "The same time tomorrow, Mr. Collins?" she asked, packing up her tools with practiced efficiency. "I'll be here," Nathan promised, and for the first time in years. He genuinely looked forward to morning. Walking to his Honda Civic, Nathan reflected on the day's revelations. He'd been insulted, challenged, and humbled by a woman who didn't know about his billions or care about his social status. Yet somehow, those honest interactions felt more real than anything in his previous life. Violet Martinez saw him as just Nathan Collins, a clumsy trainee who needed guidance. And strangely, that felt like exactly who he wanted to be as he drove home to his modest apartment. Nathan couldn't shake the image of Violet's genuine smile when his circuit finally worked. In a world full of people who fawned over his money, he'd found someone who valued effort over privilege. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. 2 weeks had passed since. Nathan started working at the factory, and the transformation was remarkable. His soft hands now bore small calluses from handling tools. His expensive haircut had grown out into a more natural style. Most importantly, his arrogant attitude had melted away under Violet's patient but firm guidance. "Good morning, Mr. Collins," Violet greeted him as he arrived exactly on time, carrying a simple lunch bag instead of expecting catered meals. "Morning, Violet," Nathan replied, the formal distance between them gradually warming into genuine friendship. "Ready to tackle those power supply circuits today?" Violet smiled, pleased by his enthusiasm. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd watched Nathan transform from a clueless trainee into someone who genuinely cared about doing quality work. He still made mistakes, but he learned from them instead of making excuses. "Actually, I have something special planned today," she said, leading him to a different section of the factory floor. "You've mastered basic assembly. Time to learn troubleshooting." She brought him to a workstation covered with malfunctioning devices that other workers had set aside for repair. Circuit boards with mysterious problems, equipment that wouldn't power on, components that tested within normal ranges but somehow didn't work properly. "This is where you separate real technicians from assembly line workers," Violet explained. "Anyone can follow instructions to build something new. But fixing broken equipment requires understanding how everything works together." Nathan picked up a digital display that flickered randomly. "Where do I even start with something like this?" "The same place my father taught me to start with any problem," Violet said. "Ask questions. What is this supposed to do? What is it actually doing? What could cause that difference?" Watching Nathan carefully examine the device, Violet remembered her father's workshop behind their small house. Carlos Martinez had repaired everything from televisions to washing machines, teaching his daughter that patience and logical thinking could solve almost any problem. "The display should show steady numbers," Nathan said thoughtfully, "but it's flickering. That suggests either a power problem or a connection issue." "Very good. Now what would you check first?" Nathan reached for his multimeter, now as familiar as any tool he'd ever used. "Power supply voltage, then connection integrity at each joint." Violet watched him work, methodically through the troubleshooting process she'd taught him. His movements were careful and deliberate, no longer the fumbling gestures of someone afraid to break expensive equipment. Somewhere along the way, Nathan Collins had stopped acting like a privileged outsider and started thinking like a real technician. The lunch revelation during their lunch break. Nathan and Violet had developed a routine of eating together while discussing work, life, and everything in between. Today, they sat outside on a small patio behind the cafeteria, enjoying the Arizona sunshine. "Can I ask you something personal?" Nathan said, unwrapping the sandwich he'd made himself that morning. "Shoot," Violet replied, curious about what had been on his mind. "Why'd you become an engineer? I mean, with your skills, you could probably work anywhere. Big tech companies, aerospace, places that pay a lot more than factory work." Violet was quiet for a moment, watching clouds drift across the desert sky. "My father used to say that work isn't just about money. It's about purpose. When I fix something here, when I train someone like you, I'm helping keep this place running. These jobs matter to people." Nathan nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. You stay because this work has meaning. Exactly. And besides, she added with a grin, where else would I get the satisfaction of teaching completely hopeless trainees how to make a simple LED blink? They laughed together, and Nathan felt that familiar warmth in his chest that had been growing stronger each day. Violet's laugh was genuine and infectious, nothing like the calculated social responses he was used to from his previous life. "What about you?" Violet asked. "What made you choose electronics? Your resume says technical school, but you seem more like someone who ended up here by accident." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. Every day, the lie became harder to maintain. He wanted desperately to tell Violet the truth about who he was, but he was terrified of losing the honest connection they'd built. "Maybe I did end up here by accident," he said carefully. "But I'm starting to think it was the best accident of my life." Violet looked at him with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Nathan Collins, are you being mysterious on purpose?" "Maybe a little," Nathan admitted, and they both smiled. Growing closer as the weeks continued, Nathan found himself looking forward to work with an enthusiasm he'd never felt for anything in his privileged life. More than the satisfaction of learning new skills or solving technical problems, he treasured every moment spent with Violet. She had a way of explaining complex concepts that made them seem simple. When Nathan struggled with a particularly difficult circuit analysis, she didn't just give him the answer. Instead, she guided him through the logic step by step until he reached the solution himself. "You're getting good at this," she said one afternoon, reviewing his work on a batch of repaired devices. "All of these test perfectly. I think you're ready for independent assignments." Nathan felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with money or status. "Really? You trust me to work without supervision?" "Trust is earned," Violet replied, "and you've earned it." That evening, as they walked out to the parking lot together, Nathan made a decision that surprised even him. "Violet, would you like to have dinner with me? Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk outside of work." Violet stopped walking and turned to face him. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Collins?" Nathan felt his face flush. "I suppose I am. If you're interested." She studied his face for a long moment. And Nathan worried he'd crossed a line that would damage their professional relationship. But then Violet smiled, the kind of warm, genuine expression that made his heart race. "I'd like that," she said softly. "But I choose the place. Somewhere we can actually have a conversation. The perfect evening Saturday evening." Violet directed Nathan to a small family-owned Mexican restaurant on the outskirts of Phoenix. The building was simple, stucco with hand-painted signs and mismatched furniture. Nothing like the five-star establishments Nathan usually frequented, but the aromas coming from the kitchen smelled incredible. "This is perfect," Nathan said sincerely as they found a quiet table near the window. "My father brought me here when I was little," Violet explained. "The Hernandez family has run this place for 3 generations. They make everything from scratch." Nathan looked around at the photos on the walls showing the family's history. The regulars who clearly knew the owners by name, the obvious pride everyone took in their simple but honest business. In his previous life, he would have dismissed this place as beneath his standards. Now, he found it far more appealing than any exclusive restaurant. "Tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume," Violet said after they'd ordered. Nathan's mind raced. Everything interesting about his real life was connected to wealth and privilege he couldn't reveal. But these weeks at the factory had shown him parts of himself he'd never known existed. "I never knew I could find satisfaction in fixing things," he said honestly. "Growing up, when something broke, it just got replaced. I never learned the patience to understand how things work or the persistence to keep trying until I got it right. And now I understand why your father found dignity in his work. There's something deeply satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again." Violet reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. The simple contact sent electricity through Nathan's entire body. "I'm glad you found your way to our factory," she said softly. Nathan turned his hand palm up and gently intertwined their fingers. "So am I." They've spent hours talking about dreams, childhood memories, and hopes for the future. Nathan found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone, carefully edited to remove references to his wealth, but true in every emotional detail. Violet opened up about her father's death, her struggles to prove herself in a male-dominated field, and her determination to honor her family's work ethic. As the evening ended, and Nathan walked Violet to her modest but well-maintained sedan, she turned to face him under the restaurant's soft outdoor lighting. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I had a wonderful time." "Me too," Nathan replied, meaning it more than he'd ever meant anything. They stood close together in the warm Arizona evening, and Nathan felt drawn to her like gravity. When Violet didn't step away, he leaned down and gently kissed her. It was soft and sweet, nothing like the calculated romantic gestures he'd used with other women. This kiss felt like coming home. "Good night, Nathan," Violet whispered against his lips. "Good night, Violet." As Nathan drove back to his modest apartment, his heart felt fuller than it ever had in his penthouse suite. He was falling in love with an amazing woman who saw value in honest work, found joy in simple pleasures, and cared about him for who he was becoming, not what he owned. For the first time in his life, Nathan Brooks felt truly happy. But as his feelings deepened, so did his fear of what would happen when Violet inevitably learned the truth about his identity. The weight of secrets Monday morning brought new challenges beyond the technical work. Nathan found himself struggling with the growing weight of his deception. Every smile from Violet, every shared laugh, every moment of genuine connection felt both wonderful and painful. He was building something beautiful on a foundation of lies. "You seem distracted today," Violet observed, as they worked together on a complex power distribution panel. "Everything okay?" Nathan looked at her concerned expression and felt his heart clench. She genuinely cared about him, worried about his well-being, trusted him completely. And he was betraying that trust every day by pretending to be someone he wasn't. "Just thinking about some personal stuff," he said, which was technically true. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes sharing helps." Nathan almost laughed at the irony. The one thing he needed to share was the one thing he couldn't. "Maybe later," he said, forcing a smile. But later never came. Each day, Nathan found new reasons to postpone the conversation that could destroy everything he'd come to value. He told himself he was protecting Violet, that knowing the truth would only hurt her. Deep down, though, he knew he was protecting himself from losing the only genuine relationship he'd ever had. Deepening love despite his internal struggles, Nathan's feelings for Violet continued to grow. She showed him parts of Phoenix he'd never seen, introduced him to people who valued character over wealth, and helped him discover interests he never knew he had. They spent evenings at community events, visited local art galleries, and took long walks through desert parks. Nathan found himself genuinely engaged with the world around him for the first time in his adult life. Everything seemed more vivid, more meaningful when shared with someone who truly mattered to him. "I love how you see things," Violet said one evening, as they watched the sunset from a hiking trail in the Phoenix Mountains. "You notice details other people miss." Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "You taught me to pay attention. I think you always had that ability. You just needed someone to show you it was worth developing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the desert sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. Nathan felt more peace in that moment than all his wealth had ever provided. "Violet," he said softly, "I need you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. Whatever happens in the future, I want you to remember that what we have is real." She turned to look at him with curiosity and tenderness. "Why does that sound like goodbye?" "It's not," Nathan said quickly. "I just want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." Violet leaned against his shoulder, and Nathan wrapped his arm around her. "You mean everything to me too," she whispered. As they made their way back down the trail in the gathering darkness, Nathan made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to tell Violet the truth soon. She deserved honesty, and their relationship deserved a foundation of trust instead of deception. But first, he needed to figure out how to reveal his identity without losing everything that mattered most to him. 3 months had passed since. Nathan started his new life at Brooks Industries. What began as punishment had become the most meaningful period of his existence. He woke each morning excited to see Violet, to tackle new technical challenges, and to continue building something real with someone who cared about him for who he was becoming. Their relationship had deepened beyond simple attraction. They spent evenings together exploring Phoenix, sharing quiet dinners, and talking about dreams that seemed possible for the first time in Nathan's life. Violet had shown him hiking trails in the desert mountains, introduced him to her favorite bookshops, and helped him discover interests he never knew he had. "You seem different lately," Violet said one morning, as they worked together troubleshooting a complex power supply issue. "More confident, more yourself." Nathan looked up from the circuit board he was analyzing. "What do you mean?" "When you first arrived, you seemed like you were trying to be someone else. Now you just seem comfortable in your own skin," she explained, adjusting a component connection. "It's nice to see." Nathan's heart clenched with guilt. If only she knew how right she was about him trying to be someone else. Every day, the weight of his deception grew heavier. He wanted desperately to tell Violet the truth, but he was terrified of losing everything they'd built together. "Violet," he began hesitantly, "what if you found out someone you cared about had been keeping a secret from you? Something big." She paused her work and looked at him seriously. "That would depend on the secret and why they kept it. Some secrets protect people, others just protect the person keeping them. How would you know the difference?" "I guess you'd have to trust that the person would eventually be honest with you," she said. "Trust is the foundation of any real relationship, Nathan. Without it, nothing else matters." Nathan nodded, her words hitting him like physical blows. Every day he delayed telling her the truth was another day of building their relationship on a foundation of lies. The unexpected visitor that afternoon. James Peterson approached Nathan's workstation, looking unusually tense. "Nathan, I need to speak with you privately." They walked to Peterson's office. Nathan immediately sensed something was wrong. Peterson closed the door and turned to face him with obvious concern. "Your father is coming for a surprise inspection tomorrow," Peterson said quietly. "Richard Brooks will be here with some potential investors. He wants to see how the factory operates without advance notice." Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. "Does he know I'm working here?" "Of course he knows. This whole arrangement was his idea," Peterson replied. "But the investors don't know who you are. Your father specifically requested that your identity remain secret during their visit." Nathan's mind raced through the implications. Richard Brooks touring the factory where his son worked as Nathan Collins? Violet discovering that her boyfriend was actually the heir to the company that employed her? Everything he'd built crashing down in a single moment. "What do I do?" Nathan asked, panic rising in his voice. "You do your job," Peterson said firmly. "Your father wants to see how you handle yourself as a regular employee. This might be your chance to prove you've actually changed." But Nathan wasn't thinking about proving himself to his father. He was thinking about Violet's face when she learned the truth. About the betrayal she would feel, about losing the only real love he'd ever known. The moment of truth, the next morning arrived, gray and ominous. Nathan arrived at work early, hoping to somehow prepare for the disaster he knew was coming. Violet met him at their usual workstation, coffee in hand and a warm smile on her face. "Morning, handsome," she said, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. "Ready to tackle those quality control reports?" Nathan tried to smile back, but his heart was breaking. This might be the last morning she looked at him with love instead of betrayal. "Violet, there's something I need to tell you," he began. But she was already moving toward their work area. "Can it wait until lunch?" she called over her shoulder. "I want to get these reports finished before the big inspection today." Nathan's stomach dropped. "What inspection?" Peterson announced it this morning. "Some big-shot investors are touring the facility." "Richard Brooks himself is coming," Violet said, organizing their paperwork. "Everyone's nervous about making a good impression." Before Nathan could respond, he heard familiar voices approaching the factory floor. Through the office windows, he could see his father walking with 3 well-dressed men. Peterson leading the group and pointing out various operations. "There they are," Violet said, following Nathan's gaze. "I've never seen the actual owner before. He looks exactly like what I'd expect from a billionaire businessman." Nathan watched his father approach, knowing that in moments, his carefully constructed new life would collapse completely. Richard Brooks walked with the confidence of a man who owned everything around him, pointing out efficiency improvements and profit margins to his potential investors. The group stopped at various workstations. Richard explaining different processes while the investors asked questions about productivity and costs. They were getting closer to Nathan and Violet's area with each stop. "I should probably look busy," Violet said, returning her attention to the quality control reports. Can you imagine working directly for someone that wealthy? The pressure must be incredible. Nathan couldn't speak. His throat felt closed, his hands trembling as he tried to focus on the circuit board in front of him. In minutes, everything would be revealed. The devastating revelation, and this is our electronics assembly and quality control section. Peterson was saying as the group approached their workstation. "We have some of our most skilled technicians working in this area." Richard Brooks stopped directly in front of Nathan's workbench. And for a moment, father and son locked eyes. Nathan saw surprise flicker across his father's face, followed by what might have been pride. "Interesting," Richard said, examining Nathan's work. "This is very precise assembly. What's your background in electronics?" Nathan's mouth went dry. He was trapped between maintaining his false identity and speaking honestly to his father in front of the investors. "Technical school training, sir," he managed to say, his voice barely audible. One of the investors, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit, studied Nathan more closely. "You look familiar. Have we met at industry events?" Nathan's heart pounded. "I don't think so, ma'am. I'm just a regular technician," but Richard Brooks was studying the nameplate on Nathan's workstation. "Nathan Collins," he read aloud. Then, with a slight smile that only Nathan could interpret, he added, "Collins. Interesting name." That's when Violet looked up from her reports and really noticed the conversation happening at Nathan's station. She saw the way the investors were studying Nathan, strange expression on Richard Brooks' face, and something that looked almost like recognition. "Nathan," she said slowly, standing up from her chair, "do you know these people?" Before Nathan could answer, the sharp-eyed investor snapped her fingers. "I knew I recognized you. You're Nathan Brooks, Richard's son. I saw you at the Technology Leadership Summit last year." The silence that followed was deafening. Every worker in the surrounding area stopped what they were doing. Violet stared at Nathan with growing horror and understanding. "Brooks," she whispered, and Nathan watched her face change as the pieces fell into place. "Your name isn't Nathan Collins? It's Nathan Brooks." "Violet, I can explain," Nathan started, but she was already backing away from him. "You're his son," she said, pointing at Richard Brooks. "You own this place. You own all of this." The entire factory floor had gone quiet. Workers who had accepted Nathan as one of their own now stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to betrayal. The man they'd trained, laughed with, and welcomed into their community was actually their ultimate boss. Richard Brooks looked around at the stunned faces and made a decision. "Perhaps we should continue this tour in my office," he suggested to the investors. But Violet wasn't finished. "How long?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "How long have you been lying to me?" "From the beginning," Nathan admitted, his heart breaking at the pain in her eyes. "But Violet, please let me explain." "Explain what?" "That every conversation we had was based on a lie? That while I was worried about impressing the owner, I was dating him?" Tears started flowing down her face. "That everything I told you about my father's pride and honest work was just entertainment for some rich boy playing dress-up?" "It wasn't like that," Nathan pleaded, stepping toward her. "Don't," Violet said sharply, holding up her hand. "Don't you dare come near me." She looked around at their co-workers, who were watching the scene with mixture of fascination and discomfort. "Did any of you know?" she asked. The silence was her answer. Only Peterson had known, and he looked deeply uncomfortable with how the situation was unfolding. "So I was the only fool," Violet said bitterly. "The only one stupid enough to believe that Nathan Collins was real?" The aftermath Nathan tried to follow. Violet, as she gathered her things and headed for the exit, but she turned on him with fury he'd never seen before. "You made me fall in love with a lie," she said, her voice breaking. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" "Violet, please. My feelings for you are real. Everything between us has been real. Has it?" she challenged, "because the man I fell in love with was someone who understood what it meant to work for something. who appreciated honest labor, who knew what it felt like to struggle. But that was never you, was it? You were just slumming it with the working class for entertainment. That's not true, Nathan said desperately. Working here changed me. You changed me. I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. No, you're exactly the same person, Violet replied coldly. You're still a privileged rich boy who thinks he can have whatever he wants. The only difference is now you want something you can't buy. She walked away, leaving Nathan standing alone on the factory floor with dozens of his former coworkers staring at him. The comfortable camaraderie he'd built over 3 months evaporated in an instant. Fighting for love, the next several days were the darkest of Nathan's life. He continued going to work, but the easy friendships he'd developed were gone. Workers who had joked with him and included him in their conversations now treated him with polite distance. He was no longer Nathan Collins, one of the team. He was Nathan Brooks, the boss's son, regardless of what station he worked at. But the loss of workplace friendships paled compared to losing Violet. She requested a transfer to a different shift to avoid seeing him. When Nathan tried to approach her in the parking lot, she walked away without acknowledging his existence. Nathan realized he had 2 choices. He could return to his old life of privilege and pretend these 3 months had never happened. Or he could fight for the love and the man he'd become. He chose to fight. First, Nathan went to his father's office for the most honest conversation they'd ever had. Dad, I need you to know something. I'm not taking over the company. Richard Brooks looked up from his desk with surprise. What are you talking about? The investors were impressed by your work ethic. You've proven yourself. I've proven I can do the work, Nathan corrected. But I've also learned what I actually want from life, and it's not running a business empire. Then what do you want? I want to earn Violet's forgiveness. I want to become someone worthy of her love. And I want to find a way to use our resources to help people instead of just accumulating more wealth. Richard studied his son for a long moment. And if she never forgives you? Then I'll spend the rest of my life becoming the man she believed I could be anyway. The grand gesture. Nathan knew that words alone wouldn't repair the damage he'd done. He needed to prove that his transformation was real and permanent. Working with Peterson, he developed a plan that would demonstrate his commitment to the values Violet had taught him. He used his inheritance to establish the Violet Martinez Memorial Scholarship Fund, providing full technical school scholarships for children of factory workers. He created an employee ownership program, giving workers shares in the company's profits. Most importantly, he permanently gave up his claim to inherit Brooks Industries, instead establishing it as a worker-owned cooperative. But he didn't do any of this publicly. Instead, Nathan quietly implemented each program, ensuring that the benefits reached people without any recognition for himself. He wanted Violet to see that his changes weren't about winning her back, but about becoming a better man. The path to forgiveness, it took 2 months of consistent action before Violet began to notice the changes. The scholarship fund was helping 3 of her former students attend technical school. The profit-sharing program was improving life for every factory worker. And Nathan continued showing up every day, doing honest work without seeking special treatment or recognition. One evening, as Nathan was leaving the factory, he found Violet waiting by his Honda Civic. "We need to talk," she said simply. They drove to the same Mexican restaurant where they'd had their first date. The Hernandez family greeted Nathan warmly, unaware of the drama that had unfolded since his last visit. "Why?" Violet asked once they were seated. "Why did you give up everything?" "Because everything I had before wasn't worth having," Nathan replied honestly. "Money and status are meaningless if you can't share them with someone you love. And I can't be the man worthy of your love while holding on to wealth I never earned. The scholarship fund is named after my father. He deserves to be remembered. His wisdom guided me toward becoming someone better." Violet was quiet for a long time, processing everything she'd learned about Nathan's recent actions. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said finally. "I don't expect you to," Nathan replied. "But I hope you'll give me the chance to earn it back." Love rebuilt it wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. Violet made Nathan prove his sincerity through months of consistent actions. They started as cautious friends, rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of complete honesty. Nathan told her everything about his privileged upbringing, his father's ultimatum, and his fears about losing her. Violet shared her pain at feeling manipulated and her struggle to reconcile the Nathan she'd loved with the wealthy heir he'd hidden. Slowly, trust returned. They discovered that the connection they'd felt was real, even if it had been built on incomplete information. The man Violet had fallen in love with wasn't entirely fictional. He was who Nathan became when he stopped trying to impress people with money and started trying to impress them with character. 6 months after the devastating revelation, Nathan and Violet stood together on the factory rooftop where they'd shared their first honest conversation. The little lead circuit Nathan had built that first evening was still in Violet's toolbox, kept as a reminder of possibility and growth. "I love you," Nathan said, the words carrying more weight than they ever had before. "I love you too," Violet replied, and this time there were no secrets between them. They kissed as the Arizona sun set behind the mountains, two people who had found something more valuable than money or status. They had found authentic love, built on genuine respect, shared values, and the courage to become better versions of themselves. Nathan Brooks had learned that the greatest inheritance wasn't wealth, but the capacity to love and be loved honestly. And Violet Martinez had discovered that sometimes the most profound transformations happen not despite our differences, but because of them. Together, they had built something real, something lasting, something that no amount of money could buy, but that honest love could create from nothing at all.